everyone. This is a quick introduction to the work I've been doing so far at St. Leonard's around pedagogy. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge the contribution that the first Australians have made to our nation and pay our respects to their past, present, and emerging elders and leaders. So today I want to talk about a little bit of the research I did in Term 3 and the start of Term 4 this year. And I first of all went and talked to about 35 staff in the end, actually, across the college and the junior school, the middle and the senior schools, and heads of learning, but also a range of teachers. And I asked them that question: what is the pedagogical values, or what are the pedagogical values at St. Leonard's? And the main themes that I got back from that question was, in order of preference, actually. First of all, student agency. That was number one, really. A lot of people talked about that, but they did have different understanding of that. A lot of people in the junior school particularly spoke about inquiry learning. Many of the teachers I spoke to talked about the importance of building relationships and why that was so important in learning. Education for life certainly came up, which is great because that's our strapline here at the college. Concept-based understanding was there as well. People really talked about the love of subject and love of learning, learning through doing, and preparation, of course, for the formal assessments. They were the main themes that came up in my meetings with everybody. And what I tried to do was get it into a graphic, something that we could be aligned around. And that really looks like this. At the top, we've got innovative practice. And St. Leonard's has always been at the forefront of innovation in education. It's sort of in our DNA here at the college. We were one of the first schools to go co-ed, one of the first ones to take on the IB in the state. So this has always been what we do. And we love innovation, and going around and talking to many people, they love how this is a school where you can try new ideas. You're not mired in tradition. People spoke about, as I mentioned, student agency, this idea of empowering our learners, making them empowered and thinking learners. And the thinking certainly draws on the Harvard Project Zero work that we've been doing with Ron Richard over the last few years. Making sure that our students know that they should think, they should question, they should inquire about what they're learning. And finally, and equally as important, is the authentic and caring relationships that we foster and establish here at St. Leonard's. So there's loads of stuff already going on at the college in these areas, with student agency, with conceptual planning of curriculum, and also that incredible knowledge of students that you get when you just walk around. And, you know, I've been only here for a couple of months, but I chat to teachers and they seem to know so much about those students who are in front of them in a really loving and caring way. And all of those things together, we need to then see what impact are we actually having on the learning of our students. So that has to be underpinned, as I've put there, by that cultural shift to ensuring that we're measuring our impact going forward. One of the big things that came up in my meetings was this idea of alignment. So loads of stuff is going on all around the college, which is awesome, but people are struggling to see how it's all connected. And that's why I thought that graphic was important, because I think going forward, what we want to do is whatever we're doing, whatever innovative practice that we're actually engaged in, is it aligned to those core values of empowered thinking learners and authentic caring relationships? And look, I think it will be, it will be aligned to those things, but it's showing all staff, the new staff coming into the college, that this is what we are valuing as our pedagogy going forward. And we need to base all of those things around those values. This was the next question I asked people: how have triads been working? And look, honestly, everybody was positive that I spoke to, that they thought that a program like triads should exist at an innovative college like St. Leonard's. We should be pushing the boundaries, we should be collaborating, we should be working together to create new and interesting things. But there's the logistical issues, as you can imagine, always came up. Obviously, this has become even more challenging since the COVID lockdown. And as I mentioned before, this feeling that it wasn't quite clear why we were doing the triads. Yes, it was great for the collaborative aspect, but what was it linked to? What was it connected to? What was it aligned with? And I think the key is, let's make sure that these triads, or however they look going forward, and I'm going to show you a bit of a model of what we're proposing going forward soon, that's actually aligned to a core purpose. And if that purpose is there, staff will find it much easier to engage, especially if that purpose is actually practical and going to give them some sort of practical payback in the classroom. So everybody's feeling as though this is why I'm involved in this, because I'm actually seeing the results in my classroom. So we certainly saw this need to reinvigorate triads after the whole COVID lockdowns, get them going again, but in a slightly different form where they are more aligned to our overall values and people can really understand why they are doing it. They shouldn't feel like, and this is the key point, another thing to do. So you're working on creating some brilliant concept-based curriculum in year 9, and you're doing all that work, and then, oh, now I've got to go to a triad meeting. You know, that development of that concept-based thinking curriculum in year 9 should be your triad. So people don't feel as though they have to do this work, which they're actually quite interested in doing, plus the triads, which is, oh, a process I've got to go through. The process should feed into the work that you want to do and that people are working on pretty much already or know what they want to work on. We need to think about our focus. So how are these triads that we're going to rename going to be focused on what we want to work on? And our new name is this, Innovative Learning Communities. So it picks up this idea of innovation and that innovative practice that we've got as one of our core values. And of course, learning communities, the PLC model, that idea where we're going to be working together, we're going to be testing what we're doing in the classroom, discussing it, feeding back, measuring the impact, and then applying it more holistically or scaling it up going forward. So the aim is to link those core values of empowered thinking learners and authentic caring relationships to our innovative practice. And our innovative practice will start with a clear vision and focus. We believe in a school where ... You know, that's the key, is to give us an idea of what we really want to do. And this should allow us to use these ILC and this ILC practice to do all sorts of things. It could be pastoral process reform. It could be communication development. If we're really looking at that authentic caring relationships, and there's loads more we could write around that box. But then there's the curriculum development, the assessment processes, resource exploration, pedagogy development. There's all those things that we can do using this process. And what I've endeavored to do is to design a process that actually can draw on any improvements we want to make at the college. And we can use that process to make these improvements. A change management ideation process, which should be effective, drawing on the ideas of, yes, Kath Murdoch, yes, Helen Timpany, which is obviously the one, the model that VIT registrations follow. So there's lots of models out there, and I've tried to use a bit of my own experience, a few of those other models, and put it together to create what I would say is a St. Leonard's model for how we're going to run these ILCs. So let me talk you through the model because it's pretty simple. It's not rocket science, but hopefully you'll see how it's going to work really practically for you in your own classrooms. Number one, empowered thinking learners. So we come up with this in vision and focus. For example, we believe in a school where students systematically use their assessment comments to effectively improve their work. Wouldn't that be great? But if that's actually our focus, that's what we believe in, that's our vision, that's what we start with. So we come up with a statement that sort of embodies that vision. And obviously, you know, we're not going to get it done in a year. These things do take a long time, but the process does form over years. So we need to take at least one step towards that vision within 1 year. The first step is we use data to address our current reality. What do we know already about this particular vision? You know, I marked 24 pieces of Year 9 English, and I put comments on every one, and I think only 6 students read the comments and reacted to those comments when they did their second draft. So that's our current data. We've collected that. We've found out that it's basically not working right now. Only 6 out of 24. That's not good enough. So what do we know and how do we know? The next step is we do some research. And that's the point where that will be supported by the school as well. Once we start really refining what we're going to be working on, and I'll get to that in a minute, but we start to research. We start to look at what knowledge do we have already at the school about, let's say we're using the same example about assessment. Who else has worked on that already? And what did they do? And that could be research within the school, it could be research without, and it could also be professional learning opportunities. So that's when you start looking for, well, who else can tell us about this particular issue? Once we've done our research, then we start to think about our plan. What do we plan to do to address our reality? So is there ideas? We have to have an ideation session, and are there ideas that we can use to develop a plan? What often happens is that when we have our vision and our focus right back at the start, we already have in our mind a bit of a plan of what to do. And that's fine, and that's good, and you might stick to that. But I think it's really important to take it that step back, to look at the current reality, to do a bit more research, to really evaluate, is the plan I originally thought I was going to do, is that going to work? Is that going to be the most effective thing I could do this year? So that ideation, that planning stage is important. Then, of course, we go into the monitoring stage. And I would say that's around term 2 and term 3. We try and get the first 2 steps done in term 1, planning and implementation done in term 2 and term 3. And how will we monitor it? And part of that does need to be a lesson observation. And then finally, our assessment. Has it worked? Did what we introduce into our classrooms actually give us the result that we want? Are students, or do I mark year 9 work again at the end of next year and find that only 4 of them read the comments? Well, I hope not. But that's the sort of thing we have to assess. It might not work, it might fail, but that's fine. We've gone through a process, we've seen what we're going to do, and hopefully it does work. And that's the point where we share it with our community, because that's our opportunity then to scale. Because if something works brilliantly, we want to tell everybody else, not just the people in our ILC, we want to be able to tell everybody else. We're already thinking about DECCON next year, where we can have some sort of celebration event where we show this brilliant work that we've actually done. So term 1, term 2, or 2 and 3, that side on your right will be certainly that idea of working through those 2 terms for planning and monitoring, and then term 4 for measuring and assessment. So we've got the analysis and research phase, the ideation phase, which is behind my face up there, sorry, the implementation phase, and then the assessment and sharing phase. We want to use the learning forums to conduct these meetings. So when you would have had triads, if you like, this is when we're going to be able to do it. We want to set up templates on Schoolbox, using Teams perhaps as the other option, to look at how we're going to share, how we're going to make that communication as easy as possible. And these are some of the so-called rules that we're going to put around these, because people want to look, the devil will be in the detail with this sort of thing. So these are the ideas that we're working with at the moment, and it is a consultation, but we want to have this pretty much sorted by DECCON, when I'm going to announce it to the whole staff. One lesson observation has to occur. That's going to be sort of laid down as part of this process, and that obviously goes in that monitoring phase. I would be suggesting groups of 3 to 5, but it might be, let's say you're doing a big thing like assessment. It might be you have a group of 18, but then you'd want to split that into 6 groups of 3 or much smaller groups to make it manageable and more logistically viable. But every now and again, meet as that whole group of 18, where you're looking at, there might be differentiation. So the group numbers when it comes to the actual ILC will be 3 to 5, but there might be broader themes, and the grouping might reflect that going forward. It would be great if there's cross-department, cross-year group. I think that's a lovely element of the old triad system, but I don't want to be inflexible about that. I think it's important that what you do is the most useful for you and your work. So whatever you decide to do, once we go through the application process, that's what you'll do. And it might be more useful for, a group of year 9 teachers to work together on a particular theme. And then it might be much more useful for a group of year 3 and year 4 teachers to work a group of year 7 teachers on something else. So we can be flexible and we can look at that. I've said here, not just work that you would do anyway. And what I mean by that is, if it would normally take you a Sunday afternoon to rewrite the year 8 curriculum in term 2, and you'd normally sit down on a Sunday and you'd look at what you used to do and you'd add a couple of things and you'd write it out, and then you'd fire it, 3 or 4 hours later, fire an email out to the other year 8 teachers. What I'm trying to say is that isn't going to be an ILC. You can't sort of say, oh, well, that's my ILC because I've gone off and done that. It needs to be work that is innovative. So drawing on that value of innovative practice, and it needs to have some scale. So even if it's just a pilot at the start, you need to then think, well, how will this be scaled up? So if you decide in year 8 to do a concept-based curriculum change for term 2, or some interdisciplinary curriculum, for example, in term 2, you'll need to talk to 2 or 3 other people. You'll need to get together in a group, discuss it. Then you'll need to design the curriculum. Then you'll need to implement it and give it a go, see if it works, judge, use the data to see if it's worked or not, assess it, judge it. That can be an ILC. So can you see how it's still what you would have done, but you're just doing it at a little bit more level, a higher level of detail. You're making it even more innovative, and it can be scaled up, because then you can say to people, this is what we did to create a concept-based curriculum. So you can use our process, even if you might be in a different subject, different faculty, you can use that system, that process going forward, if that's what you want to do. So that's what I mean by work that is innovative and with some scale, where you can assess the impact. That's the key. So how you're going to actually measure it and judge it. And there will be a process of proposals. So that will be a web form where you propose an ILC on a particular topic. You tell me who else is going to be in your group. And then the academic executive and me and Felicity and Chris, we will sit down, we will look through those suggestions, those proposals, and then we will approve some. But there might be some where we go back to you and we say, listen, we don't want you to do this in 2022. Can you press pause on it? Because we'd love you to be in this other group that's going to be working on this, and you've got that experience. For example, you might say, I really want to do something on assessment for learning. And we might say, look, we want that to wait for a year, because we think, first of all, can we do something on literacy? And we'd love you to be in this literacy ILC, providing your understanding of that aspect and testing things in your classroom that we're talking about with literacy. So there will be a process, and I imagine that this will be happening in February and early March, where we're piecing together these groups. Of course, there will always be staff who are the stragglers who don't join any group, and we'll need to be able to put them into certain groups as well. So there will be a process, and then get everything finalized. I'm hoping at the start of March, where we say, this is the ILC that you're in, and this is what you're working on. And we're certainly hoping that all of the ideas are coming from the staff. It just might not be that you get to do your idea in the very first year. I mentioned the stragglers. So the way I've formatted this is why, start with why, as Simon Sinek says. The why is our pedagogical values. Is it innovative? Is it empowering thinking learners? Is it nourishing authentic and caring relationships? That's our why. The how, well, that's our process. This is the process that we're going to follow through the year to ensure that we're actually getting to an endpoint by the end of 2022. And that's so important, that these things don't drag on and then lose energy and then lose innovation, as that what often will happen. And finally, the what, and this is the important thing for you to consider today in particular. I've called next year them learning spotlights, because learning priorities sort of should always be priorities. And I see that as our values. Our priority is empowered thinking learners and authentic caring relationships. They're our priorities, always, forevermore in some ways. But obviously it makes sense to use those values to come up with a series of spotlights that we want to focus on for a particular year. And we haven't reinvented the wheel, because of course we know there's a new headmaster, a new principal coming towards the end of next year, and he will want to be adding his ideas to these spotlights and changing our focus, I'm sure. So we've stuck pretty much to the same spotlights as we had in 2021. But I've reworded them a little just to show you the potential of what an ILC could look like. So the first one is encouraging and developing global competence. And I've put there through innovative concept-based curriculum design. So an ILC could be about that. Through interdisciplinary learning initiatives, and we want an ILC to be about that after the presentation on the 16th. Through social action, there's a great potential there, and co-curricular activities. So you can see where there's so much potential for ILCs to work underneath the banner of the spotlight, which is then of course linked to our original priority, our value of empowered and thinking learners. Because empowered and thinking learners are certainly globally competent. And that's how we can link what we do as an ILC with the learning spotlight, and then with our pedagogical values going forward. Second one is, as you know, encouraging and developing student agency, resilience and well-being. And through here, I've got metacognitive initiatives, cultures of thinking from Harvard University's Project Zero, which I'm going to be looking at as well next year. And my feeling with that, excuse me, is to focus more on the new staff who perhaps haven't come across that before, and maybe form a new staff ILC, which is very much focused on the cultures of thinking, and use that time to get that really embedded into their practice. Interdisciplinary and concept-based learning, again, that can fall under their global competency or the student agency. Differentiated curriculum design, high potential and learner strategies. Shout out to Haley on that one. Certainly that could be an ILC that falls very nicely underneath this learning spotlight. And targeted pastoral initiatives. There's also work going on in the IB. Shout out to Craig on that in the senior school, and Chris in the junior school. Or middle and senior Craig. But this idea that though that sort of work that you need to do, which is coordinating some specific things that the IB have said to us that we need to be working on, that can fall very nicely within an ILC and beneath this learning spotlight. And finally, the literacy one, encouraging and developing lifelong literacy. There's a bit of work that's planned to be done in the junior school in particular for that, really consolidating the programs, refining them, making sure they're consistent across and through year levels, looking at transitions. And I know Maggie's already doing some work on that transition space as well from 5, 6, 7, 8, that sort of area. So there's a lot of work to do, and you can see how that work falls very nicely underneath an ILC. So I suppose what I'm hoping you're seeing is that this work that's sort of already going on and is often going on in addition to triads, I want to bring that into the fold. And I want to say, well, that work is actually really important school improvement work. So that's the work that should sort of be your triad, and or as we're calling them now, your ILC, to make sure that you know you've got maximum energy for the work that is most important, rather than splitting everything into more and more and more different groups working on slightly different things that don't feel as aligned. So term one. This is where we're showing the staff, all the staff, what our aims are for the year, reinforcing those cultures of thinking for those new staff, organizing these ILCs, and once they're organized, straight into that, what's our current reality, that analysis, and then the research phase. Well, what are we going to do about it? You know, what's already going on in school, but also what PL can we do and what research can we do around it? Term 2, that's when we're straight into planning them and actually implementing them. Similarly, in term 3, continue that implementation and monitoring phase, including those lesson observations. And term 4, the assessment phase. How's it worked? How's it gone? What's happened against that baseline data that we collected originally? Have we actually been successful? So very welcome to give me feedback. But as I said, it would be great if this is sort of ready to go for DECCON when I can introduce it to all staff. And I think that's the key, to get them thinking about, well, what would they like to focus on? Because staff, the why I think is not rocket science. I think that we will be pretty much agreed on that. The how, I'm very open to suggestions if you want to refine that process a little bit or discuss how that process looks. So please send me through those suggestions. But often it's for staff members, they will focus on the what. Well, what are we going to be looking at? Is it differentiation? Is it literacy? Is it curriculum design? Is it cultures of thinking? And to allow staff just over those summer holidays, just to start thinking, well, where would I like to be working? And then we'll go through that formal application process from the start of term 1 when all the new staff are here and going forward. Thank you very much for your attention in this little video. I hope that's helpful, and I will see you soon.